a lot of these.
It's a great
Hi.
business opportunity to be speaking to Katherine today. Katherine is a specialist resume writer. She is also running the website let me give me a second. Yeah, myhireroads.com. That's where the students can explore more the resume writing and get in touch with more mentors and mentees and more training and about also life coaching about finding their way in life. It's a great evening to be speaking to you, Katherine. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. And
Could you
it's morning
please?
here.
Yeah.
And I live in Florida, so I'll give you everybody that little heads up. It's very, very hot right now. So we're dealing with the heat. Um, this is our winter, what we call our winter. I moved from New York City, from Manhattan. I have two children, and both of them are very successful. But as I said, I started this program, myhireroads.com. It was born out of the fact that I was mentoring students at George Washington University, the School of Public Institute of Health. It's really well known because its professors and the physicians in the program are on CNN all the time. So they are high level people. So I'm working with those people. I'm also on the board of George Washington University too, as well. And I started about 4 years ago with this and meeting these students that were trying to devise a program with oncoming students, people that are coming into the graduate program. And basically, when you start out in the graduate, I went to that graduate program. You know, you're young, you're in your 20s. You have no idea what you want to do in healthcare. And I think most of the students say, money, that's what I want to do, money. Well, that isn't really how it works. If you really love what you do and have a passion for it, the money will come. And many of these students, and like myself, became chief operating officers of major corporations. They went into healthcare, they went into insurance. Now, how did they do that? Like myself, I did it with no money. I took out loans. I have a world famous, my father was a world famous ophthalmologist, but was determined that I was going to do this on my own. So what happens, I started this program, what they call the SAMP program, and we align mentors, mentees, students, 34 students with mentors, which are about 51, and they're all high level healthcare individuals, presidents, CEOs, corporation, once the president of Yale New Haven Hospital, which everybody knows that name. And then I parlayed that off to my business. So if people wanted to like take it a step further and have life coaching and figure out what they wanted to do, they would go into myhireroad.com and start working with me on writing a resume. And when you do that, you start describing yourself. You start seeing your future. And you can sit there and say, I say to them, do you want to go into management or do you want to go into analytics? And I can figure out pretty quickly that this person wants to go into analytics. But I don't, drop it off right there. I go into the life coaching, then I go into their LinkedIn profile. And recently I just had one person said, when I redid her profile, I said, do you know how many awesome things you do? And you didn't put that onto your resume? There's something about the fact that you can't describe yourself really well. And that's where I help you describe yourself. After that process is done, I hook you up with a mentor and I put you into that mentor. And as we all know, networking is the way you find jobs. So that's a brief description of what I do.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So the question that comes to mind is, now you are an entrepreneur in the field of health care. How did you manage that?
Okay, so I did a startup company as well as working for a high profile insurance company, which was Cigna Corporation. Maybe you know it or not know it. It's one of the major corporations. I've always been working with high level insurance companies. At the same time, I started my own business, which was called Diopsis. I was one of the founders, and it detects deficiencies in children early on, like at birth. You know, like people, when a baby's born, they always test the hearing. So I was working with engineers to develop a piece of equipment that would detect whether they had visual deficiencies. So I had to learn the workings of a startup company. It's not an easy thing to do. You're always running out of money. You have to do clinical trials. You have to have the FDA approve it. You have to have the physicians approve it. But then I started my own company with that background, knowing how to write a business plan, knowing how to write executive summary, knowing how to work a lot, try to get the investors to come in to play, because you always need money when you have a startup company. And that's what I'm doing in the process right now.
So, as I understand, you always had this, let's say, attitude or preparedness to start your own business. How did you manage that since an early age, as I can see?
You always have your failures, but you can't let it get to you. You just say, okay, this was a bad day, but I'm going to get up and I'm going to figure out another way to do this. And I think most of the successful people have had their failures. You know, I mean, we're all hearing the stories about like people that went, you know, the head of Google or Bill Gates. They didn't finish Harvard school. They didn't finish. They had a goal. They didn't have it be successful at first. They learned through their failures. And I think you could be your worst enemy. You could throw your hands up and say, I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm done. You know, I get up early in the morning. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm communicating with people. I'm reaching out to people. Networking is like so powerful. You know, people say, let me put you in touch with this person. Let me put you in touch with that person. They glean a little bit of that and move forward.
When was the moment when you knew that, okay, I'm gonna make it?
I don't think there was any moment that I you cannot sit there and say, I'm going to make it. You're going to just say, I'm going to plug away at it. You know, every moment. When I look back now, because I was one of the first chief operating officers of a major multi-specialty corporation in the United States. Did I see myself in that position? All of a sudden I got the job and I sat back and said, wow, I broke the glass ceiling. I was one of these women way back now. Women are being accepted into those kind of roles, but I was 1% of that. They offered me the position. I went home and thought, can I do this? And I did it.
Yeah. So what exactly would you say to other people who are going through these failures right now, like me?
Exactly. All right. We also, my family owns a family barn that is a wedding venue. Some people know this and some people don't. It used to be a barn that my mother grew up in. It was dilapidated, totally falling apart. It's now a wedding venue that is booked out for 2 years in advance. If you saw that barn in the beginning, you would have thought, burn it down and start all over again. My brother and I started that. And what he told me is never give up. Never give up. And so it was a process. It doesn't happen overnight. It's 10 years. Now that is, you know, my family farm is on a website, a Wedding Wire website, and it's fabulous. And it's booked out 2 years, even with the COVID going on. So yeah, that's what he told me. Never give up.
Fantastic. The glass ceiling, how did you break that? What inspired you to do that? And how do you feel after you have made this achievement?
Well, looking at you, I feel like you're my equal. I just sit there, and that's the same thing. As a woman in that position, you can't look at a man and say, oh, he's a man. I have to look up to him. I have to look at you and say, you're my equal, and I have to prove myself. And once you prove yourself, it becomes seamless. There's no difference. You know, those men will take a certain role. I'll take a certain role. We'll meet in the meetings. I give my feedback. And I also will, which most people don't realize, speak up and say, if something's not right, always ask that question. No question's a stupid question. And don't sit back there and let somebody else take that role, because that's the role that you need to be in. And I've watched way too many people sit in a meeting going, yeah, and say nothing. So if you want to learn, you take on those projects. And I remember somebody saying, if you're going to ask a question, always have a solution for that question. You know, you're going to get that project if you ask a question. So be prepared to say, okay, I'm going to take ownership of this and learn it.
Yeah.
And a lot of hard hours, a lot of work.
Certainly. Yeah. So my question is, this glass ceiling, is it a psychological barrier more, or is it a procedural barrier from the work market itself?
It's a psychological barrier. It is a psychological barrier.
And
It's like if you don't, you have to have your goals. You have to set yourself goals and put out all that outside noise that isn't coming into your head. You know, I have two children. People don't know that I'm divorced. I had to bring up two children and do this job and maybe miss out on a lot of things with my children, but I didn't let that outside noise bother me. And I got up every morning and was on the train at 6 o'clock in the morning and didn't get back home until 8:30 with my children.
fantastic. Yeah, my question is, what took you so long, you and the other women, to break this glass ceiling?
It didn't take me long. I mean, I was doing it in a way. But what takes other women long is that they're inhibited by the fact that they have kids, that they're divorced. They have to put food on the table. But there's ways to do that and there's ways to work around things, a lot of things. Some things will give. I mean, my kids were really super bright kids. I mean, I had to leave them home alone at certain points. And I came home to, the house was destroyed. I was like, you couldn't do this? You couldn't put the dinner in, whatever? And, I mean, those are the things that you have to overcome. You have to learn how to shop. You have to do multitasking beyond belief. And I think women, specifically women, are extremely strong and they learn multitasking. For example, I'll just give you an example. Even as busy as I am, I threw in laundry while I'm talking to you, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's the other thing. Use a sense of humor. Always have a sense of humor. You can't take life so seriously. You just have to juggle it.
Yeah, that's amazing. Let's come to your points of strength and power. As a divorced single parent, how did you survive and how did you manage to influence your children?
Um, I installed in my children. I kept them in a very affluent area. I was the poor person in the affluent area, but I wanted to keep them in a very good school system because I knew that would parlay them into the positions they are. I have one son that is 32 years old, and he's getting his second MBA. He has one already, and he's working while he's doing this. He went to Colorado College. I paid for their colleges. And then he got out and he's working on Wall Street and he's getting his NYU Stern Business, which is one of the top Stern Business schools, while working. And so I installed in them to work. You have a certain amount of time to get your education. He's taking loans out to do this. And I said, you're young, do this now. Don't wait until you're older. My daughter is another person that I installed in that just because you're a woman doesn't mean you can't become extremely successful. She became an engineer and was a graduate of Lehigh and then parlayed that to work for Boeing Industries in aerospace. And then she went on, she moved from Boeing into Aramark. She finished her NYU Stern Business School graduate in predictive analytics, and she's still working for the company too at the same time. So do it while you're young, while you don't have a lot of things going on. And I think my mother taught me that too. She said, always have an education. Education's key. You can always fall back on it.
Do you think that you needed a mother with the same mentality you have now?
Well, when you say that, what's the question? Did I need my mother who was the influencer or
Yeah, I
to
know.
help?
Yeah, now you have a certain mentality. You understand how businesses work. You understand the worth and the importance of being educated and having studied at a certain level. So now you are pushing your children. You are parlaying this knowledge to them, and you are directing them into the correct directions, as you can see. Do you think you, in your place, needed someone with this kind of mentality and this kind of understanding?
You don't need a mother. You need somebody that's going to believe in you. You're going to need a mentor, and that mentor will be there. My mother, I left home when I was 17 and never looked back. I paid for my own college education and my graduate school. I didn't need to, I just did it. And my mentors were first myself. I was my mentor, learning through those mistakes. And then I found another mentor when I was doing this, who was a doctor, and he kept taking me on to each position. And I'd say, you know, Simon, I don't think I can do analytics. I don't even know analytics. And he said, learn it. And I did. I mean, made mistakes and I learned it. So yes, I think you can have outside mentors, not necessarily your parents. My dad's a perfect example of that. His parents went to third grade. That was the only grade. He had a degree from undergrad degree from Yale, and he received his doctorate or his MD from Yale Medical School. And he's also became a world famous eye surgeon with no money, none, nada there. And when he looks back on it, I think he just did it. He didn't have role models back then. His parents couldn't afford to send him to school. Nothing like that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Let's continue and explore more. How did you manage your school days?
You do block times. So that means when you compartmentalize, if you say you need to get something done and something that's going to be difficult, you need to do it the first thing. That you have to overcome that first thing. So the rest of your work will be sort of easier, not difficult. And you also say, okay, this is the time I'm going to work. I work in a closet with no windows. By the way, I was a telecommuter for so many years. So now people are going over to telecommuting. And I never use Zoom. We always use like WebExes, and we'd come on WebExes. So I had to envision where I was and keep that time specifically for that time.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Describe the challenges you have faced as a woman who broke the glass ceiling.
The challenge would be to balance my kids' activities, to make sure that they were doing those activities. And also, I missed out on a lot of things to break that glass ceiling. And again, it's not thinking about getting there, just doing it like the Nike commercial. You just do it. And then all of a sudden you're there. And yes, you get a lot of opposition, but at the same time, even when you say something, people are thinking about what you said. So I do reflect on some of the things I said, and then you hear dead silence on a meeting, you're like, and then somebody will pipe up, and I know that they're giving me an endorsement for what I said. So you can't let those negative thoughts come in.
Could you give an example that was a challenge for you? Yeah.
Sure. Just last week, this past week on Wednesday night, it was on a board meeting, an alumni meeting. And I was on part of the part where they were coming on, like they said at the end of this meeting, what were the challenges? Does anybody want to speak about something? Well, what I wanted to know was George Washington University, like a lot of universities around here, pulled their students to go back online. They were supposed to be in classrooms. And I said, can somebody speak to that? How that was done in a week? Or can somebody speak to how like telecommuting was done in a week? And they all started laughing because they said they had to rapidly ramp up to this so fast to get the students back at home or in a place with a lot of complaining going on with their parents, but they did it. And it's working out perfectly. And the person said to me, you can learn as easily online as you can do in a classroom, a virtual setting. You can learn in a virtual setting, but they did it. So that was an example which everybody was like, is anybody going to answer that question? And finally the person did answer the question. And he said, that's a very good point, Kathy.
What would you tell other women and other females to be able to grab their opportunity and not miss on it?
I said, listen to that voice. Don't listen to like your husband's voice or your spouse's voice or your partner's voice. Just go ahead and do it. I mean, there are a million reasons not to do it. And a lot of times, your kids are calling at you. Your husband is saying, you need to do this, take care of the kids. You need to take care of yourself too, because you'll feel better about yourself.
How does failure feel?
That's a really good point. I never let it feel. All right. I never let it feel. I'll give you another example. I'm a horseback rider. At my age, I still jump pretty high jumps, and I've fallen off those horses and I've broken my back, believe it or not.
Sorry for that.
And then I said, oh, no, don't worry about it. I had to have surgery, but I said, I'm going back to riding. And now I still ride. I'm still jumping. I'm still there. So that failure was, okay, I could have given up horseback riding. Everybody in my family just said to me, stop it. Stop the jumping. Stop it. You can't do this anymore. I have rods in my back. And I said, no, I'm going to do it. I can do it. My joy. I love it. It's passion. So I got up, brushed all the dirt off my face, my helmet, and said, can I feel my toes? Yes. And I knew I had to go into surgery and come back. So that's how failure feels. Like, keep picking yourself up and going back. And
let me ask you this question. Like, are women afraid of challenges, risks, dangers, taking chances?
Yes, they are, because the fact that they've not had role models like men like yourself, who probably had a role model, right? As a man, you were brought up to say, I'm going to have a career. I'm going to do that. Women don't have those women mentors. Women can be your worst enemies too. They're in a situation where they're nervous themselves of being in the high level. So you can't latch on to them. Again, it's going with your gut, and pushing yourself forward and putting yourself into a position where, I always say, knowledge is power. If you learn certain programs, if you do your studies, you have the facts to back yourself up and move forward. So that's where those challenges are. Don't listen to what you can't do. Listen to what you can do.
What are the requirements to be able to help, or let's say inspire other women to get more into the field?
I talk to a lot of the women that are going into the field all the time. And when I see somebody that I know is going to be a chief operating officer, I was just on a phone call with one. I said to her, what do you want to do with that management background? And she said, I want to go to the top. I want to be a chief operating officer. She made a conscious decision, which I admire. I'm not saying everybody should do this, because I didn't do it. She said, I'm not going to have kids because this is what I want to do. We're talking about the work-life balance thing. She said, it won't balance for my aspirations. And I said, good for you. That's great, So children aren't for everybody, but you can work around that too. Obviously, I'm a perfect example.
Okay. So my question is, if you repeat the same journey again, what would you like to change?
I think I would have liked to spend more time on public health epidemiology because of the virus. My degree was in public health, and we all said, oh, this virus will never happen. It'll never take place. And we always look back and go like this, maybe I should have listened more in that conversation, what was going to go on. Because this virus is mimicking the 1918 virus too. And the same things are occurring, but we didn't listen too well in those things. So that's one thing I would have changed.
What would you have changed about your study?
Go more into analytics, much more. Learn Python, learn R. I know SAS programming. I think predictive analytics for a woman is the way to go to the top. If if you're going into an industry that engineering, let's say, you need to know programming. Software programming is changing all the time, and it's advancing. Just like we can talk on Zoom, and you're in Egypt and I'm here in Palm Beach, it's amazing. All the workings behind that to make this happen. So that's what I'd say. Go into those fields too, as much, as well as, bring in the managerial part if you want to do both.
Are you happy with the amount, or let's say the proportion of women representation in the labor market and in the high position right now?
Absolutely not. We've come a long way, but we're not there yet. A lot of people say, I want to have a kid. And when they have a kid, they're like, how can I handle this, all of this? And they give up. They become housewives. And I sit there and I go, well, you just went to Harvard or Yale. You didn't use any of your applications that you did. You didn't go for I have a joke about that. I call that the MRS degree, which is the Mrs. degree, and not your degree that you have. So yes, there is a disproportionate, but it's getting better. We're seeing more females. Like, for example, the vice president nominee, Kamala, is up there. I'm so happy to see a woman, strong woman there. Those are setting our roles. Michelle Obama, I mean, that's another one that's setting roles. So use them as example. They're doing pretty well. They're fine.
So my main question here is that, as I can see that family and the children sometimes oppose the occupation and the development in the business world. How, or let's say, how can you women balance between your family life and your business life and allow yourselves more progress?
You need help. You need family. You need babysitters. You don't need your kids on Zoom calls. I watch more women with kids. Like, I'm sitting there going, yes, I had children too, and I laugh about that because I resorted to things like go use the video games while I'm on television just so I can get this Zoom done. Or I'll call in a neighbor and say, can you take my kids? I always had to do this. I mean, I always had to juggle it because I knew that I had to focus on what I was doing. So yeah, you need help. You definitely need help, whether it's a grandmother, whether it's, somebody else. I don't know. I mean, how does that compare in the area that you're at? I'm asking these questions because I'm talking from an American perspective.
I
Do
think
they have help?
yeah, I think they are very similar things here and there. That's why I'm quite trying to explore the question more, because women are facing the same challenges as you are saying, like children, family. Sometimes they quit in their jobs, sometimes they are not inspiring, or let's say challenging enough. They don't take enough challenges, they don't aspire to move on their careers. So my idea is that, like, this is a basic challenge for you, like everywhere, as I can see. So it needs a professional solution.
It does, and that's daycare, and it's done at a reasonable price. It's also, I had, daycare people bringing my kids up eating Twinkies, something that I would never have my kids eat. But I had to do that, and I had to drop them off at neighbors, like I said, and just not let that impede you, your progress. I worked 2 hours away from my children, you know, so if something happened, I had to get on a train and get back to be with those kids. Also make your kids independent. I don't think women do that. They think that, when you have your first kid, your first child, it's like, oh, I don't want him to do this, I don't want him to touch this. You have your second kid, you're like, eat the crackers and let's get away from this. So you have to realize that you're going to have to give a little bit, and maybe sometimes, your kids won't have what other children whose mothers stay at home have. I got up at 3 o'clock in the morning to make my kids lunches. They complained about it, and I said, listen, if you're complaining about these lunches, you're getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning to make them. And so they still laugh about that, and they look back on those years.
My other challenging question is, sometimes women quit, stay at home, become housewives, and then their children don't achieve.
Exactly. Be the role model for them. My kids, both of them are in telecommuting positions. When I first started telecommuting, my son wasn't in the position he's in now. So he'd come home and he'd say, hey, Mom. And I'd be on a Zoom call and I'd be oh, And then my daughter ramped up pretty quickly and was using sign languages, submitting notes. So I became the role example. And it's funny you said that, because my brother said, do you know your son's teaching classes on OSHA? I said, I don't know where he learned that. And he goes, no, he's telecommuting and teaching these classes. I wonder how you learned to be a telecommuter. I said, Bob, I was a telecommuter for 5 years. I set the example on how you do that. I was taking my cell phone constantly around on calls when I was taking them to doctors and everything like that. And at some point they'd say, throw that phone away. I said, I can't in my work. You
Yeah,
make it a priority.
fantastic. What else would you like to say?
Nothing, except don't get discouraged. Don't give up. I mean, don't let somebody talk you out of doing this if that's what you really want to do. You know, if you get yourself out of the field for a couple of years, man, you're so behind the curve. That's unbelievable. Technology is advancing so fast. And let's say you take, a couple of years out of your life to bring up your kids. You can do that, but stay active, learn, continue to learn what's going on. Don't get into the mother's group thing and, just start throwing your business clothes away. I mean, that's a bad thing if you are determined to make a career or have a career.
Yeah, it has been great, empowering, unusual to speak to you, Katherine, today.
Well, thank you. I hope I answered all your questions correctly.
Yeah,
I enjoyed it too. So good luck to all you women that are trying to push ahead, and all the students that are trying to push ahead too as well. It's a pleasure.
it has been a great pleasure, Katherine. Thank you.
Okay.